민주주의가 가장 발달한 나라라고 자부하는 미국. 그 핵심에는 민주주의의 꽃 선거가 있다. 하지만 투표 집계가 정확한지 여부를 확인할 수 없다면 그 선거로 유지되는 제도를 민주주의라고 부를 수 있을까? 미국 시애틀에 사는 한 여성과 함께 전자선거의 이면을 들여다보자. 그녀의 기나긴 여정은 미국은 과연 유권자들의 표를 제대로 세고 있는가란 질문에서 시작됐다. 그녀가 발견한 건 겹겹이 쌓인 비밀과 쓰레기가 된 선거용지, 투표를 조작하는 방법이었다.
When people see what's really going on, there's no way we will allow this to continue.
How are you?
2000년 미 대선의 최대 격전지는 플로리다였고 최대 쟁점은 재검표 여부와 그 방법이었다. 하지만 표를 집계하는 컴퓨터에 의문을 제기한 사람은 아무도 없었다. 투표가 끝나고 몇 시간이 지난 후 플로리다주의 한 선거 관리원은 미국의 민주주의가 위기에 처한 징후를 처음으로 목격했다. 볼루시아 카운티의 컴퓨터가 고의 표를 거꾸로 세고 있었던 것이다. 그의 득표수 앞엔 마이너스 기호가 붙어 있었다.
It was showing a minus sign in front of the votes that it had subtracted from Gore. I mean, it wasn't like it was trying to hide it. It says there's minus 16,022 votes here.
유권자들의 표 하나하나를 성실하게 합산해야 할 컴퓨터 프로그램은 어째서 더하기 대신 빼기를 했을까? 단순한 착오였는지 선거 조작 음모였는지 알 길은 없다. 마이너스 득표수가 나온 이유에 대한 조사 결과 기계 자체는 문제가 없다는 게 확인됐다. 말썽이 발생한 건 대통령 선거의 득표수 합계뿐이었기 때문이다. 원인은 제2의 메모리 카드가 로딩된 것이었다. 메모리 카드엔 투표 결과가 입력돼 있는데 문제의 메모리 카드는 이후 사라져버렸다. 마이너스 득표의 원인은 이렇게 묻혔고 일부에선 선거 조작 음모가 있었을지도 모른다는 주장이 제기됐다. 득표수를 집계한 소프트웨어는 종합선거 관리 시스템 잼스이며 2002년 전자투표기 제조업체 디볼드는 이를 사들였다. 디볼드는 전자투표기와 소프트웨어 작동 방식을 공개하지 않고 있다.
I was the chief technical advisor to the Secretary of State of the largest state in the United States, and I was not allowed to look at the software running in Diebold or any other vendor's voting systems. To this day, I have not been allowed to look at that software.
이런 소프트웨어를 이용하는 주는 30개가 넘는다. 누군가가 소프트웨어를 조작하거나 오작동이 발생하면 엉뚱한 사람이 당선될 수도 있다. 공직에서 활동 중인 수백 명의 정치인, 판사, 관리 등도 잘못 뽑힌 사람일 수 있다는 얘기다. 이건 민주공화 한 당의 문제만도 아니다. 데브 해리스는 정치평론가이자 작가이고 할머니다. 컴퓨터나 투표 제도에 대해 아는 건 별로 없었지만 워싱턴주의 새 전자투표기 도입 소식을 듣자 그녀에겐 의문이 떠올랐다. 이 의문은 미국 선거 제도의 허점을 밝혀내게 된다.
You know, I had a life before I did this, and I never really envisioned becoming any kind of an activist or advocate. But sometimes something comes into your life and you know, well, if I don't do it, then maybe no one else will, and then maybe I don't want to bequeath that to my children. I put 3 words into a news search engine, voting machines and glitch, and found dozens and dozens of elections that were miscounted by the machines. And about that time, I thought, we really have a problem.
베보 해리스는 전자투표기가 말해주는 선거 결과를 의심하게 된다. 루이지애나주에선 공화당 후보로 출마했다 낙선한 수전 버네커가 터치스크린 전자투표기를 점검하러 갔다가 작동 오류의 증거를 화면에 담았다.
This is where I came the day that the warehouses are open to the candidates to inspect. So I came here with an old college buddy. He grabbed his camera, and I asked him to show me how the machine worked. So I just started fooling around with the machine. And it's when I pressed the button next to my name, and then I look down and I see Mr. Gambaluca's name in the display when I press Susan Bernecker.
Shall we do it again?
Do it again.
Yeah. Okay, here we go again. I'm pressing Bernecker. Gambaluca shows up.
So we went down the row. We probably tested 15 machines, and I said, you know what, we don't have to test anymore. And that is when I said, oh my goodness, this is terrible. We can't count our votes. So how do we know this is right?
투표는 비밀리에 해야 하기 때문에 전자투표기 오작동의 예가 증거 화면으로 남아있는 경우는 드물다. 문제는 미국 유권자의 투표 중 80%가 컴퓨터로 집계된다는 점이다. 선거를 치르고 전자투표기를 구매하는 건 미국의 각 카운티다. 투표기계의 종류는 다양하지만 그 유형은 크게 2가지다. 터치스크린은 유권자가 화면에서 선택한 결과가 메모리 카드에 담긴다. 광학 스캔은 종이에 표시된 점을 기계가 읽는다.
7 o'clock, polls are closed.
투표 결과는 컴퓨터의 메모리 카드에 저장된다.
This is the voter cartridge. This cartridge is very important, and it goes right into our bag.
There it is.
이 메모리 카드들을 집계용 컴퓨터로 가져가며 집계용 컴퓨터는 각 후보의 득표수를 집계해 당선자를 발표한다. 문제는 표를 집계하는 컴퓨터를 유권자들이 볼 수 없다는 점이다. 집계의 정확성도 확인할 길이 없다.
Suppose that we didn't have any computers at all, and when you went to vote, the voting booth was separated by a curtain, and there was a guy behind the curtain who would write down your votes. So you just dictate them, he writes them down, and when you're done, you leave without being able to look at the ballot. Most people in their right mind would not trust this process. The guy behind the curtain could be incompetent, he could hear your votes wrong and record them improperly, or it could be that he doesn't like your political affiliation and would prefer to see your votes cast for someone else. In an electronic voting machine, you don't have a little guy inside the machine taking dictation, but you have lots of people who are involved in writing the software and lots of people who could have touched the software before it went into that machine. If one of those people puts something malicious in the software and it's distributed to all the machines, then that one person could be responsible for the change of possibly tens of thousands of votes, maybe even hundreds of thousands across the country. That's a very dangerous situation.
You know, I began looking into these voting machines, and one reason I was so curious is because it's a secret how they work. The companies that make them keep it a secret. None of the computer scientists felt they could even look at the code because the code was supposed to be a secret. The certification labs that examine it keep their process a secret of what they do, and even the election officials who buy the equipment are prohibited by their contract from ever looking and seeing how it works. What happened next really changed my life. I was looking for technicians who could perhaps answer some questions of mine, and while I was looking for technicians, I stumbled upon an obscure web page. The web page was an old predecessor of the Diebold election systems page, and I clicked a link, and that link took me to a site that was not a web page, but it was more like a library or an online filing system, and it contained a bunch of different files, just like you see on your computer, and within those were more files, and within those were more files, And the files were amazing. They were things like the software specifications, the software itself, the drawings for the hardware, the user manuals, passwords in some cases. It was the crown jewels for Diebold election systems.
당시엔 몰랐지만 베이브 해리스가 찾아낸 건 잼스란 프로그램이었다. 디볼드의 종합 선거 관리 시스템 잼스는 미국 유권자 40%의 표를 센다.
So I began downloading these files, and throughout the night I continued to download them. Throughout the weekend I continued to download them. There were so many files. It took about 40 hours to download all the files there were. And then I knew I would be working on this project for a long, long time.
당시까지 미국 유권자들의 표가 집계되는 방식을 아는 건 투표기 회사 관계자들 뿐이었다. 하지만 베이브가 내려받은 자료 덕분에 전자투표의 비밀은 풀리기 시작한다. 디볼드는 베이브가 회사 파일 전송 시스템에서 자료를 훔쳤다고 주장한다.
The FTP site was an unfortunate situation, I admit to that. It was a situation where that information was out there, it was captured, which was our fault. We made a mistake, and we readily admit that. Will it happen again? No, it will not.
I had never looked at software code in my life, but as a writer, one thing you learn to do is ask a whole lot of questions and learn as much as you can about things. I will say that I didn't want to go through it. I thought, maybe I can cover this story without really learning how it works, but it wasn't to be. I had to actually learn how it works. After finding the files, I sort of collected together some various computer scientists or computer programmers who could help me understand them. And Avi Rubin did an amazing study with 3 colleagues of his.
I got a call that the Diebold code was on the web. Bev Harris had found it on Diebold's own site. And so, did I want to analyze it? And I said, sure. I was very excited about the opportunity to analyze Diebold's code. And I think it's the first chance anyone had ever had on the outside to see what's going on inside of these electronic voting machines.
루비는 시스템 작동 방식을 알지 못해도 선거 조작이 가능하다는 걸 보여주었다.
The problem that Bev has discovered is a pretty significant security hole, and it does open the way for people to really seriously manipulate the election in a way that's very difficult to detect.
문제는 디볼드의 시스템에만 있는 게 아니었다.
Sequoia, ES&S, and Diebold have the lion's share of the market. In fact, ES&S and Diebold alone have about 80% of the electronic voting market.
메릴랜드주는 5,500만 달러에 디볼드 전자투표 시스템을 도입했다. 그리고 라바 테크놀로지의 보안 시험을 의뢰했다. 라바는 10초 만에 전자투표기 시스템에 침투했다.
I mean, what have they spent the 55 million on?
Accuracy and security and reliability of the equipment. Again, there's a perception there.
Well, it's more than a perception. I mean, these scientists broke into the machine.
I will tell you from what I read in the Robert report, and I've read it very carefully, is that the steps that they took and how they stated that they had affected the machine in an environment of an actual election would be virtually impossible.
전자투표기를 도입한 주들은 대부분 독립적인 시험기관의 인증을 요구한다. 전자투표기들이 적절한 시험을 거쳤다면 왜 그렇게 많은 오류가 발생하고 왜 덧셈도 제대로 못하는 걸까?
It seems I have friends, both in private industry, working for these companies, and working in government, that I don't know about and don't know who they are, who know there's something wrong. They're disturbed by what they see, and they want people to know what's going on. What I have obtained here, and these are hard to get your hands on, are 2 reports. One is for Vote Here, one is for Diebold GEMS system. They're both from Cyber, which is an independent testing authority. They have these extensive charts where they go over all of the different regulations in the FEC guidelines, and they have check mark after check mark saying that yes, they pass, they pass, they pass, they pass. Both of them are the same. You get to the last page, and there's a check mark in the other column. Something wasn't tested. And what was not tested is the security of the system. This is the test that tells us whether these things can be tampered with. And here I have penetration analysis not reviewed by software ITA.
배부 해리스는 블랙박스 보팅을 설립했다. 블랙박스 보팅은 비영리 유권자 권리 보호 운동 단체다. 웹사이트엔 자신의 조사 결과를 공개했다. 워싱턴 주무장관에 출마한 앤디 스티븐스는 그걸 읽고 배부에게 연락을 했다.
I was still actually running for office. And my reaction was bleep, I'm screwed. Bev and I couldn't get any answers from our public officials, no matter how much we hounded them. It was just impossible. So we decided on our own to go get the answers.
배부와 앤디는 힘을 모았다. 둘은 왜 전자투표기가 보안 검사를 받지 않는지, 왜 마이너스 표시가 나타났는지 알고 싶었다.
We set out to meet Sean Southworth in Huntsville, Alabama. He is the tester of equipment and software for all the major manufacturers of voting equipment.
Something's broken in the promised land. A broken promise in the promised land.
Hey, Lisa, just read it.
Just do what you do best, darling.
앤디와 배부는 숀 사우스워스를 만나러 갔다. 전자투표기를 검사한 사람의 말을 정확히 남겨두기 위해 몰래 카메라도 달았다.
Looking for Sean Southworth. That's you. Hi, I'm Deb Harris. I just had a couple questions.
Be that tests all these things. It's cyber. Cyber's the one that's accredited. That's who you need to be asking these questions.
Well, it's actually you, because your name is on all of the documents.
Now, all we do is in the FEC guidelines. That's what we do. And we write a report. We test the software, we review the code to the FEC standards, and then we write a report. We don't certify, we don't recommend, we don't say, this is the best stuff you've ever seen in your life. We write that report.
How do you deal with something where it accepts negative or minus votes?
We don't.
Doesn't that sound, you just go ahead and write a report? You write in your report that that's a concern?
If you ask the EAC, who you should be talking to is who we write the reports for. We can't disclose our reports to anybody.
Right, and my question is on minus votes, because we now know that happened.
Do we put things in there that have that kind of verbiage? No. I don't know of any time that I've ever put a report out that would say that, because first of all, anytime we write a report, the system's gone through the testing. And first of all, the vendor's not going to want a report that has something negative in it.
Okay.
So they will retest and retest and retest and retest and retest until they make it right. Until we get everything in there that is done to the standard. Then we write a report.
사이버는 전자투표기들이 모든 검사를 통과했다고 주장하지만, 그렇다면 왜 마이너스 득표수가 나오고 10초 만에 시스템 침투가 가능했을까?
What people are saying is, why should they trust these machines?
I think the main reason is because everything is tested before it's ever deployed for an election. And it sounds like I'm a broken record, keep going back to that, but that's a very important step.
배부의 여행은 계속됐다. 공식 기록이 궁금증을 풀어주지 못할 게 확실했기 때문에 배부는 전자투표기 제조사들과 각 카운티 선관위의 쓰레기를 뒤지기로 했다. 쓰레기 사냥에는 오하이오주 클리블랜드의 운동가 캐서린 윈이 동참했다.
Okay. Have mercy. That was fun and it smells delicious.
I mean, it's a hit or miss. It's like shopping. You never know what you're going to get until you go, and you open it up and go, okay, nothing. But this looks like a possibility.
I think what we'll want to do is get to some place where it looks like we can be fairly undisturbed, behind a supermarket or something.
둘은 수십 개의 쓰레기통을 뒤졌다.
It's legal. When they put documents out in a dumpster in public areas, it's perfectly legal to go get them because they're no longer protecting them. We wouldn't have to do this if our system wasn't secret and hadn't been turned over to private corporations.
Digital camera.
And unfortunately, what their inner workings are is the votes of you and I, citizens of America.
2004년 7월 11일 텍사스주 맥키니에서 디볼드사의 쓰레기를 조사하던 캐서린은 내부 서류 몇 가지를 발견했다.
This is some of the stuff that we found actually in McKinney, Texas, in the Diebold trash. I found an accounts receivable ledger. And in the accounts receivable ledger, I was interested to see the top item was actually money due to Diebold from the 8th District Republican Committee. Now that's interesting because this is not an elections office that owes Diebold, which would make sense because they've purchased election systems. It's a Republican political committee paying Diebold. We have a right to ask why they are collecting receivables from the Republican committee.
배부는 아직도 대답을 듣지 못하고 있다. 알려진 건 디볼드와 디볼드의 임원 일부가 공화당의 주요 정치 헌금자란 점뿐이다. 2003년 디볼드 회장 월든 오델은 공화당에 모금 편지를 보내며 오하이오주의 표를 부시에게 안겨주겠다고 약속했다.
It's important that your company is impartial, isn't it?
Yes.
So why did your chief executive say, I am committed to delivering Ohio's vote to George W. Bush in 2004?
That quotation that appeared in the letter is something that he regrets. It's a situation where his personal preference has come over into his business practice, and he has committed to keeping a much lower profile when it comes to those types of activities because of that statement.
People talk about partisan ties to the voting companies, and they're right. That being said, we're also seeing that it's not quite as simple a picture. We have the state of Maryland and the state of Georgia have Democrats very tightly wed to use of the Diebold system, and it's the Republicans who are fighting against it there. And in my own home county, Seattle, King County, Washington, it's the Democrats who are pushing these systems and the Republicans who are a little bit skeptical.
새로운 전쟁터는 실리콘밸리가 위치한 캘리포니아였다. 케빈 셜리 주무장관은 전자투표기의 안전성을 우려했다.
Well, in 2003, Kevin Shelley discovered that one of the counties was running uncertified software. And so he ordered an audit of all of the county's voting machines in California. And he discovered that none of them were using certified software.
They later even acknowledged that they were aware of the law, but even though they were aware of the law, they chose to ignore it, and they made those changes without seeking prior approval, which is a direct violation of state law. That's when I first came to realize Diebold's lack of integrity as a company.
캘리포니아주는 디볼드의 해명을 요구했다. 수백만 달러의 이권이 걸려 있었기 때문에 디볼드는 당시 회장 밤 유로세비치를 증언대 세웠다.
As you know, about a year ago, one version of the source code of the Diebold TSX system escaped your control, and some months later was investigated by a group headed by Avi Rubin, Professor Avi Rubin of Johns Hopkins University, and they wrote a report which found numerous severe vulnerabilities in the code that they saw. I would like your general reaction to those reports before we go a little more deeply.
Basically, the code was stolen. In there is passwords. In there is our encryption technology. Okay, now, I'm not a rocket science, but let me tell you, if somebody steals the key to my house, the first thing I'm going to do is probably change the lock. So that's what we went ahead and did.
That's exactly, as you know, the code wasn't stolen. It was left on a public FTP site by your own company.
The code was lifted off of our site, sir, and we still believe it was
downloaded
stolen.
from. You know that.
Okay.
Now, of course, the source code, in fact, got out. The key is now published. What in effect you did, or your team did, is create a big complex building, put locks on every door, use the same key for every lock, and then published a picture of the key on the wall. This was far below the minimal standards of security.
배부는 보안보다 더 근본적인 의문을 제기했다. 투표 집계를 맡길 만큼 디볼드를 신뢰할 수 있는가란 의문이었다.
On topic number one, Diebold, we have a company that lies. Yes, I'll say it, lies. Up here this morning, they were saying they'd made all the changes in the software to fix the multiple flaws that would have never been found in the beginning if I hadn't have found their files on the website, by the way. But, you see, there's something called release notes. It's a legal document. It is something that must show everything you did and did not change when you put out a new version. I obtained the release notes for GEMS. They did not fix any of the problems. This stuff was never corrected. I don't know what to say. How can you have a company say we want secret software that nobody, even the county registrars who are here testifying on their behalf, is allowed to look at? And when you look at it, you find flaws, and then they say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, so you turn it over to scientific panels. They find flaws, they say, oh, don't worry about it, we corrected it, and that's a lie.
디볼드의 회장이던 밤 유로세비시는 굴하지 않고 디볼드의 입장을 변호하는 성명서를 발표했다.
DESI understands that the SOS, the Secretary of State, and the voting panel are disappointed at the fact that the R&G Associates inventory report identified unqualified and uncertified software, and are looking at DESI to acknowledge that this should not have happened. To be clear, there was no improper intent or motive on DESI's part to give rise to this situation. At the outset, I want to be crystal clear that these allegations in this report about Diebold's deceiving are not true and are factually not supported.
며칠 후 케빈 셜리 캘리포니아 주무장관은 디볼드 시스템 사용 중단을 발표한다.
I am decertifying the Diebold TSX system, banning its use in 4 counties where it is installed. Furthermore, I have taken the additional step, and I have the letter here, just signed upstairs, of asking the Attorney General to pursue criminal and civil actions against Diebold in this matter, based on findings of fraudulent actions. We will not tolerate deceitful tactics as engaged in by Diebold. Don't try to pull a fast one on the voters of California, because there will be consequences if you do.
주 당국은 민사 소송을 제기했지만 형사 소송은 제기하지 않았다. 민사 소송도 디볼드의 $2,600만 보상으로 합의가 된다. 전자투표 업계의 돈벌이를 방해한 배부는 소송 위협에 시달렸다.
It was truly a difficult time, and it's the kind of thing where, you know, it kind of can make and break a marriage. I was very lucky that my husband was absolutely behind this, because, you know, here we're looking at each other going, not only do we have no money, but we could get sued by the vendors because they think their stuff needs to be secret, and we could lose everything. And he simply said, you know, my family's been fighting for the right to vote. My husband's African American. He said, my family's been fighting for the right to vote for 6 generations. And we're not going to stop now.
캘리포니아가 인증을 취소한 건 터치스크린 방식 투표기뿐이었고 선거 관리 시스템 잼스는 영향을 받지 않았다.
Now, the central tabulator is sort of the one machine to rule them all. It collects all the votes. And every company, not just Diebold, has this central tabulator. Because, of course, the way you vote is you vote in individual precincts. They're scattered around. And there has to be one machine to pull all these threads together, add them all up, and pronounce the winner.
배부는 디볼드의 종합선거 관리 시스템 잼스가 진짜 안전한지를 알아보기 위해 컴퓨터 보안 전문가를 찾아갔다.
I was at this massive hacker/computer security conference, and I get approached by this grandmotherly figure, and she tells me that, hey, I've got access to the tabulation software from one of the biggest electronic voting manufacturers on the planet. I'm like, wow, that's very interesting. And then she says, can you take a look at it for me? I'd say the thing that shocked me was how easy vote totals could be changed. So imagine you can go into a box and essentially rewrite history, and there's no record of you rewriting history, and the only record of the history itself is the thing that you changed. And that's pretty scary to me.
베브와 휴 톰슨은 잼스의 취약성을 알릴 방법을 궁리했다. 하워드 딘 버먼트 주지사와 함께 방송에 출연해 선거 결과 조작이 얼마나 쉬운지를 보여주기도 했다.
All right, Bev, show me how to do this.
Well, what we have here is the central tabulator computer. Now, in a voting system, you have all these different voting machines at all the different polling places. All those machines feed into the one machine so it can add up all the votes. So, of course, if you were going to do something you shouldn't to a voting machine, would it be more convenient to do it to the 4,000 machines or to just come in here to one machine and deal with all of them at once? The GEMS program is the program that is the central tabulator program. And I'm going to put in a password here. Okay, we're in now. This is the official program that the county supervisor sees. As we can see here, Howard Dean has 1,000 votes, and Lex Luthor has 500. So you're beating Lex Luthor, and we're
2-1.
Yes, and Tiger Woods unfortunately doesn't have any votes yet.
All right.
All right, let's close this out. I was just showing you the legitimate way to go in and look at votes, which of course you can't tamper with. Go to the Start menu, and I'm going to show you something tricky. And I want you to go to My Computer and just click that. And you're going to see go to Local Disk C and go to Program Files. Go to Central Tabulator Votes and then go to the sum of the candidates, which is that table. You see we have 800 votes here for you and 400 for Lex Luthor. Let's just flip those. We'll make that 400. And we'll give 100 votes to Tiger. Let's just see what happened here. We'll go back into GEMS the legitimate way. And as you can see now, Howard Dean only has 500 votes. Lex Luthor has 900 and Tiger Woods has 100 votes. We just edited an election. It took us 90 seconds.
디볼드를 비롯한 선거 관련 업체들은 자신들의 시스템이 안전하다고 주장했다. 현실에서는 배부의 잼스 해킹이 불가능하며 전체 투표자 수가 다르기 때문에 조작은 발각될 수밖에 없다는 것이었다. 2004년 미 대선을 겨우 2달 앞둔 때였다. 부시와 캐리는 치열한 접전을 벌이고 있었다.
Oh my goodness, you're getting so big.
Feel great, thank you. Let me go vote first.
Let's go. Okay, let's see if I can follow instructions.
The world watches our great democracy function.
All right, we'll put you down for a second, sweetie.
It's that magic moment when the greatest democracy on the face of the planet gets to show the world how we work.
It would be nothing better for our system, for the election to be conclusively over tonight, so that I think it's going to be me, so I can go on and lead this country.
정치인들의 말은 근사했지만 현실은 좀 달랐다. 전자투표기 고장이 잇따랐고 유권자 수천 명은 투표를 할 수 없었다.
And now, nobody knows.
On Election Day in 2004, we, like a lot of other organizations, had a voter helpline where people could call in and let us know the problems that they were experiencing. We logged in over 200,000 calls, and many of those people left a voice recording of what they actually experienced.
When I made my selection, it jumped from the square that I touched to the square above.
They said half of the machines were broken.
There was one voting booth, one, for 3,000 people.
7.5 hours in line to vote.
And they put two machines in another area with only 300 people,
and gave us 2 machines with 3,000 people.
And they have a lot more in the outlying, richer communities, and they don't have lines there.
I'm hardly around the first of the 3 rooms that I have to wait. The line is out to the street.
4 to 5 hour waits, you can't do. You can't do that.
Women with children having to stand outside in the pouring down rain.
There were a lot of people who ended up not being able to vote because they just couldn't stay in those lines. There were a lot of elderly people there.
It is not the people who do the choosing. Everything is so fixed. It's so fixed.
There is a calamity going on out there about how elections are conducted in this country. And it results in less voter participation and potentially a lack of accuracy in who's either elected or what decisions are made in the polling places.
투표가 끝나자 선거 관리원들은 전자투표기를 보고 모드로 전환하고 서명을 한 다음 메모리 카드를 빼내 중앙 집계 컴퓨터로 가져갔다. 미 국민은 컴퓨터의 결과 발표를 기다렸다.
Go to John first. Karen Hughes sounding pretty upbeat right now. John, what are you hearing?
But look, no Republican has ever won the White House without winning Ohio. That is a cliche. We repeat it a lot, but it also happens to be true. They've always said yes, Wisconsin and Iowa. If you look at the voting returns coming in right now, the latest I brought up a few minutes ago, I believe Senator Kerry has a narrow lead in both states.
I didn't turn on the TV for the election results, and I didn't turn on the radio. Instead, I sat here filling out 3,000 Freedom of Information requests to go to every county in the United States to obtain the internal audit logs of those computers, knowing that we wouldn't get them for weeks after the election, and that it would probably be certified and they would say, get over it, move on. And we would never know whether our election was controlled by 100 million voters or by one guy sitting in his grandmother's basement.
블랙박스 보팅은 전자투표기의 모든 작동 기록을 조사해 전자투표의 신뢰도를 확인하고 싶어 했다. 중립적인 기관의 투표 집계도 이들의 주장 중 하나다.
In America, it is vital that every vote count and that every vote be counted. But the outcome should be decided by voters, not a protracted legal process. I would not give up this fight if there was a chance that we would prevail. But it is now clear that even when all the provisional ballots are counted, which they will be, there won't be enough outstanding votes for us to be able to win Ohio. And therefore, we cannot win this election.
전자투표기의 문제점을 제기하겠다고 약속하며 대규모 변호인단을 모았던 케리가 금방 패배를 인정하자 지지자들은 놀랐다. 투표 종료 후 12시간도 지나지 않아 케리는 조사를 중단시켰다. 선거 전문 변호사 아너백은 투표 종료 직후 케리와 통화를 했다.
A call from Senator Kerry comes into the hotel room, which a group of us are there meeting with Reverend Jackson. Reverend Jackson puts his phone on the table, hits speaker, and we're now in a conversation. The first part of the conversation is a dialogue between counsel and Kerry. And part of that dialogue includes Kerry sharing the fact that in New Mexico, no matter what the demographics of the jurisdiction are, if the votes are being counted by optical scan machines, they're coming out for Bush. This is, to anyone who's familiar with the situation, this means Kerry knows there's fraud in that election.
And the optical scan machines are the clue?
Yeah, what he's saying is that it's the optical scan machines are being rigged to produce a result for Bush, contrary to what the votes the voters are casting. So this is not our conspiracy theory. This is not something we have to prove to Kerry. Kerry is sharing this as a matter of fact. Because Kerry conceded the incredible resources that he had organized for potential post-election litigation was not in the picture.
개표 집계 소프트웨어의 조작 가능성을 알았고 출구 조사에서 당선자로 예측까지 됐지만 캐리는 패배를 인정했다. 하지만 배부와 동료들은 본격적으로 표의 행방을 추적하기 시작한다.
Another 4 a.m.
배부가 조사를 시작한 곳은 2000년 대선에서 마이너스 득표수가 나왔던 플로리다주 볼루시아 카운티였다. 배부는 먼저 각 전자투표기의 기록지부터 점검했다.
Signed by the poll worker for election day, which was November 2nd. But the date was November 15th. And they were printed out minty fresh just for us, obviously. So what I was given was not at all what I asked for.
Let me check with him.
Great.
Atlanta, the original tapes off of the machines, are they still out in the warehouse, or did you bring those in at the warehouse? They're out in the warehouse.
전자투표기와 컴퓨터가 표를 어떻게 처리했는지 알기 위해서는 광학 스캔 개표기의 기록지 전체가 필요했다. 기록지의 득표수를 모두 더한 숫자와 공식 기록의 투표자 수가 일치하지 않으면 오작동이나 조작이 있었다는 얘기다.
Call Lana, call the sheriff's department.
Go ahead. Let's go ahead and get the news over here.
I think you should call them.
Ballots, secrecy envelopes, poll tapes. We have a public records request for these. I don't feel too good about the fact that they're being thrown away.
투표 기록지를 버리는 건 연방 법률 위반이다. 선거 후 최소한 22개월은 보관돼야 하기 때문이다.
The number of votes for Bush are 520. On the A01, it's 211.
And that's a big, big discrepancy. You're hundreds of votes off.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the well-known and great state of Ohio seems to be regular, informed, and authentic.
Democracy could go out of business. We won't have a republic left. It won't be recognizable if we don't get rid of the secrecy.
I said, I object to the Ohio vote. And before they could ask me, I said, and I do have a senator.
미 하원 의원들이 대통령 선거 결과에 이의를 제기한 건 100여 년 만의 일이었다. 이 제기 이유는 오하이오의 공민권 침해였다.
We're essentially hostage to the financial desires of private interests.
컴퓨터 보안 전문가인 휴 톰슨과 하리 허스티는 득표수 조작이 가능하다고 생각한다. 휴 톰슨은 선거 관리 시스템 제임스 해킹을 시도했다.